advocacy organization that works in the United States, but we definitely look to a lot of our international partners and countries for examples on best practices for some of these zero waste solutions. And we hope for communities that don't have these policies in place that you might find some inspiration here and explore that in your international community. So we partner with communities, advocates, and policymakers, including faith-based groups as well, within the United States to help implement real zero waste policy solutions. And the reason for this is because our country's waste management practices are outdated and unsustainable, not to mention toxic and unjust. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later as well. So the way that we approach this work is through four main themes. First, corporate pollution. And so this includes things like supporting policies that hold large companies accountable for their toxic and wasteful practices. Because when it comes down to it, it's really these corporate polluters that really have embedded us in this system of waste and overproduction. Next, we look at healthy environments, and the way we do this is through working alongside communities that are fighting it back against dangerous production and waste facilities. So think about your kind of plastic producing companies or chemical companies, as well as the waste facilities like incinerators or landfills and things like that. Next is preventable waste. So here, this includes developing and advocating for policies that eliminate unnecessary and polluting trash. And then finally, zero waste systems. So this includes championing efforts that build and implement proven and effective solutions to the waste crisis. And through these four themes, we have kind of a holistic approach. We attack these issues through education, policy, and community engagement. Education includes using conversations, written resources, and educational events such as this one, presentations, to spread the word about zero waste policy initiatives. In policy, we draft model legislation. We work with lawmakers and advocates to support nation-leading zero waste proposals, and we advocate before regulatory agencies faced with important waste-related decisions. So in the United States, think your Department of Sanitation or your Environmental Protection Agency or Department of the Environment, agencies like that. And we work on the the federal, the state, and the local level as well. And then finally, community engagement. We engage with community groups, faith-based groups, grassroots organizations, and coalitions to help them blaze their own zero waste trails. So community groups that kind of identify a zero waste solution that would work in their community is we're hopefully there to support. Excuse me. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the waste crisis to just kind of level set folks. So I'm sure a lot of people know that we globally have a waste problem. We have a lot of things going to trash or being burned, and this is really negatively impacting communities in terms of their environment and public health. And this is also, in a sense, a version of colonialism too, because we see a lot of countries like the United States shipping their trash to other countries who then have to deal with this and deal with the health impacts of it. So in the United States, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, the US generated almost 300 million tons of trash in 2018. That's roughly 1,800 pounds per person per year. That is a lot of trash, but this number is grossly undercounting because it doesn't include things like construction and demolition. It doesn't include things like contaminated soil or ash or hazardous waste. And also, this is a 2018 number. So we know that newer national numbers that are not available are higher, especially after events like the pandemic. We also know that plastic, so here is a kind of a pie chart of the makeup for the municipal solid waste generated in the United States. And you can see a lot of it is actually, excuse me, material that can be composted or recycled. And so that material really shouldn't end up in our landfills or incinerators where most of this trash does end up. And we know that since 2018, plastics, for example, have increased. And to right now, they're more like 15 to 16% of our makeup, and in most states. And given how light that material is, that's actually quite a significant amount of plastic. And again, most of this is dumped in landfills or burned in incinerators. And so this is really problematic for our environment and for our public health. And regulators all agree that for climate and toxicity and conservation of resources, we need to reduce, reuse, and compost or recycle. And another thing to know is that when we throw something away, away is actually a real place. It's not just kind of vanished into thin air. When we throw things away, it really has consequences. 76 million people in the United States, and this is not to mention communities internationally, live within 3 miles of a landfill or an incinerator. And most of these landfills and incinerators are in environmental justice communities. And this means that the communities are generally either low income or they're communities of color. And so this is a real environmental justice issue. This is a social justice issue. And when we treat waste as inevitable, there's really no good choice in terms of managing it. Really, what we do right now is either bury it in landfills or burn it in incinerators. And both of these options are just not the way we want to go. They're both very climate damaging, poisonous, they leave a toxic legacy, and they're just not helpful in the way that we want to move forward in our communities. And the reason why we're kind of in this state is because of failing systems and policies. We're locked into this disposal practice, and in large part because large waste companies lobby against efforts to divert materials from disposal to zero waste systems. They really want to preserve the system that we have right now because that's how they make money. Also, we have single stream recycling and contamination. So because of this single stream recycling, where we kind of dump recycling all into one that contamination is really high. And so it impacts our ability to keep recyclable, highly recyclable materials like glass, paper, cardboard, and metals clean so that we can keep that in circulation to manufacture new products. So that is one of the things that kind of makes it so we can't really move forward. Another thing is the lack of food waste recycling infrastructure and consumer education in the United States to support food waste recycling. And so, as I'm sure many of you guys know, food waste is a really valuable resource. It can lead to compost, which can then enrich our soils, which then it can then contribute to nutritious crops. And so we really don't have the infrastructure to kind of have a system that preserves food waste or food scraps as a valuable resource. In fact, in 2019, the EPA estimated that only 5% of food waste was composted in the United States. And then finally, we have these new wave of false solutions. So corporate interests are pushing for new polluting technologies that will perpetuate this waste crisis. And this last point kind of goes hand in hand with the plastic pollution crisis. So this is a really large component of our waste crisis. We're seeing plastic production is on the rise globally, even though there are efforts internationally as well as in the United States to curb plastic production and pollution. Um, Another aspect of the plastic pollution crisis is that we have so much packaging. There's so much single-use packaging that's really driving the demand for plastics. 40% of all plastics produced each year is actually used for packaging. And the majority of this plastic packaging is unrecyclable. In 2021, only 5% of the plastic waste generated in the United States was recycled. And we're finding that plastic really isn't a material that can be recycled. So recycling won't solve the problem. And I know that most of us have been taught that recycling is kind of the key for all of our waste issues. But in terms of plastic as a material and some other materials as well, recycling just isn't the way to go. And the true source of the problem of this kind of proliferation of plastic really lies in a very concentrated area by just a handful of fossil fuel companies that are wanting to make sure that their fossil fuel product it has a market. And so you can see this value chain, the supply chain of plastic, where kind of in the beginning, it's just held by a handful of companies that are fossil fuel companies. And then it kind of goes to all of these corporations that we're really familiar with that produce these consumer goods that we're really familiar with and that really are driving the supply of plastic in our consumer goods. So what do we do? So our organization, as well as many environmental groups and advocates, are pushing for zero waste policies to offer the real solutions to manage our waste. So what is zero waste? The Zero Waste International Alliance, which is a really great resource for anyone internationally or in the United States to educate themselves on zero waste policies and options that they might want to explore in their community. So this group's Zero Waste International Alliance defines zero waste as the conservation of all resources by means of responsible production, consumption, reuse, and recovery of products, packaging, and materials without burning and with no discharges to land, water, or air that threaten the environment or human health. And they've developed a hierarchy in the way that we should think and prioritize the way we manage products and our consumption and finally disposal. So, of course, at the top, we want to rethink and redesign materials to understand, do we really need them? Do we really need to make them in the way that we do? Can we cut back on them? Can we use alternative materials that are safer? And then, of course, reducing our consumption or use of resources to make these products, and then reuse. Is there a way that we can extend the life of this product so that we can get the best use and not be using our resources so quickly and depleting them? And then at the end, of course, the unacceptable is waste deregulation, incineration, and waste to energy, which I'll talk a little bit more about. So some of the zero waste systems that can work to kind of combat our growing waste problem are programs like pay as you throw, reuse and refill, bottle bills, composting, packaging reduction, and textile recycling. And I'll talk about some of these because I'll explain a little bit more about a tool that we offer on our website for communities to access. So I'll explore some of these more in depth. What zero waste isn't is individual choices alone. So, of course, working as an individual and making choices that you feel are helpful for the environment is a wonderful and very impactful thing for local communities. But it isn't the be all end all. And really, it isn't the individual that's causing all these problems. It's these large corporations that are pushing products on us and increasing the need for consumption and leading us to this waste issue. Zero waste also isn't recycle, recycle, recycle. As I mentioned before, a lot of us, I know I was taught growing up that recycling is a really large component to managing waste. And while, of course, we want to make sure we have recycling infrastructure, especially for those key materials that are highly recyclable, like cardboard, paper, metal, and glass, we want to make sure that we're thinking about prevention first. So ways that we can get on the front end where we don't have materials that we need to figure out how to dispose of. Zero waste also isn't mixed waste processing or other infrastructure that maintains the status quo. We know what we have right now in a lot of ways isn't working. And so we want to make sure that we're being more innovative and thoughtful and creative when managing the materials that we have to dispose of. And maybe not dispose of. Maybe we can reuse them or figure out other ways to incorporate them in this circular economy. Zero waste also isn't any program that involves burning, waste, including waste to energy or chemical recycling, gasification, or pelletized fuel. We have a lot of these random terms that industry groups are really pushing as a way to um, kind of like a Trojan horse. So chemical recycling, oh, that sounds kind of good because it says it has recycling in the name. But in fact, the way that they actually manage the waste in this process is just as toxic as incineration. And so we really want to be careful that industry groups aren't pulling the wool over our eyes and that we are making sure that protections are in place so that we don't just go from one really toxic waste management facility to another really toxic waste management facility. And zero waste also isn't programs that put polluters in control because, of course, this should put public first. The power should stay with the public. This is a public health issue, and we want to make sure that you and I, members of the community, are the ones that have the say in what's going on in our infrastructure around that. Another thing zero waste isn't is other false solutions that doesn't prioritize waste reduction. So again, the real key thing is getting ahead of the problem. What are ways that we can prevent waste from even existing rather than just having a massive waste that we have to manage? So what is zero waste? There really isn't one right answer. It's a combination and mix of various elements, various communities, various ways of approach, various policies, which I'll talk a little bit more about too. Real zero waste solutions start with local and state experimentation. So a lot of the policies that we have came out of communities just trying to figure things out. And the best policies came through that experimentation. We find that a static approach to policymaking really ignores the political realities that communities may have. It limits their experimentation and it dismisses their local expertise. And that's really key in getting something actually passed and something implemented and working right. Together, local priorities and lessons learned from throughout the United States and internationally as well, we look at international examples all the time, create real momentum. And so Just Zero's approach, and probably best practice approach, is understanding the communities or your priorities and your solutions. And the best policy approaches really empower communities and center those local advocates and leadership and their expertise. So our organization really thinks adaptability is key over a one size fits all approach. And so that brings me to one of the tools that we offer for free on our website, if anyone wants to kind of explore that, are model legislative toolkits. So we have this tool where folks can go on our website, look through some menu of options, which I'll explore more in depth in a bit. We have 7 right now where there's like something that you might want to regulate. And we offer a model bill or like kind of a law or ordinance that regulates that issue, that might confronts that issue that you're concerned about. And once you go into our webpage and select the thing that you want to regulate, we'll have a kind of a brief explainer about the problem to kind of educate folks who may be unaware. And then we have a bill template, which you download. And then we have kind of a choose your own adventure type approach to kind of click through each section of a bill to understand, and we provide education on why that section matters within the law or the ordinance, and different policy approaches that we've seen throughout the country in like different towns or cities or states. And you can kind of reflect, well, which works better for my community, and select the policy approach that may be more like politically viable in your community, or maybe an issue that has a lot of public support in your community that's up for something to really get passed. Um, but I will say, for those who are familiar with the policy world, this is a long fight. It's very rare where you kind of hand in a draft bill to your legislator and something gets passed. It's usually a kind of an evolving thing that may happen over a couple years. And we have some education on the legislative process as well. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about each model legislative toolkit that we offer. And here is a QR code if folks want to go ahead and visit the website and see for themselves and explore for themselves. And I'm just going to explain a little bit about what each one does, and maybe you can pick the one that you like. So the first one we have regulates beverage containers, and the model law that we explore here are bottle bills or deposit return systems. And this is a really popular policy internationally. In fact, we have some really good examples of this working well in Europe. Germany, for example, is a really strong country with really great redemption rates around this. And so what this does is it specifically creates recycling programs that collect, manage, and recycle empty beverage containers. And the way it works is a small refundable deposit is placed on recyclable and reusable beverage containers that is sold in your state. And excuse me, the consumer or the customer pays a small deposit when they buy their beverage, and then they get that deposit back when they return the empty container for recycling or refilling. And so this creates a separate recycling stream for beverage containers specifically, which keeps them clean, sorted, and so it's more easy to recycle. So they can just like be turned right back into the bottle that they originated in. More importantly, the refundable deposit placed on each container motivates people to recycle, because there's that kind of, you feel like, oh, well, I need to get that money back. So then I feel I have this motivation, this external motivation to actually preserve this bottle to recycle. Next, we have food waste. So approximately 40%, which is, oh my gosh, I can't like even fathom, of the food generated in the United States each year goes unsold or uneaten. And most of this food waste ends up in landfills where it breaks down to produce methane, which is a climate damaging gas, which I'm sure so many folks in the audience are very familiar with. The climate damaging gases and how they contribute to extreme weather worldwide and destroy homes and farms and cause death by natural disaster and food insecurity. So it's a very serious consequence of us just kind of throwing away our food scraps. So food waste and prevention and recycling laws is the model bill that we explore here. And this actually can be passed on a local level. So in your town, in your county, or in your state. And these programs or these laws slowly ban the disposal of food waste in landfills and incinerators and instead redirects edible food to food insecure households and food scraps and yard waste and things like that into compost, which can then in turn be used to make soil, which then in turn contributes to nutrients in our soil, which then in turn makes more food. Next, we have greenwashing. So if you're wanting to regulate greenwashing in your community, and this really works more on a state level, um, and greenwashing is basically the fact that so now consumers, I'm sure a lot of us here really care about environmental impact of the products that we buy. And so we're really thoughtful when we go to the store to buy something. The problem is that companies really are aware of this, and so they take advantage of our good intentions and use deceptive labels and marketing tactics to convince consumers that their single-use products and packaging are recyclable, degradable, or compostable when they're really not. And this is an example of greenwashing. So to combat this, we offer a model truth in labeling law, which can help stop companies from falsely advertising their products or packaging as environmentally friendly. And these laws require companies to prove that their products are and packaging are genuinely recyclable or compostable before being able to label them or market them as such. And this includes things like the chasing era symbol or using like kind of green and brown, kind of earthy tones or something like that. And so this is one way that you can kind of push forward some regulating on some of that deception. Next, we have packaging waste. So if you're wanting to regulate packaging waste, because roughly 1/3 of all US household waste is packaging. And so think things are like plastic wrap, cardboard boxes, plastic containers, bubble wrap, and foam containers, things like that. So packaging reduction and recycling laws, sometimes also called extended producer responsibility for packaging laws or EPR laws for packaging. These laws make companies responsible for the packaging waste they create. Now the thing here is it's a pretty complicated policy, and if you explore our model language, you'll see that it's pretty complex. There's a lot of elements that go into it. And so it's hard to design and implement it correctly because we do see that a lot of industry groups kind of get involved in the policy making process and then they kind of take over and the original intentions may not always be executed in the final bill. But when they are designed and implemented correctly, this type of policy will require large companies to take on the financial burden of collecting and managing packaging waste they create. And so next we have single-use plastics. So we know we can't recycle our way out of the plastic problem. So instead, we have to focus on reducing single-use plastics. And the way that we can do that is by targeting needless items that can be easily replaced with reusable and less environmentally damaging alternatives. So these single-use plastic reduction laws that we have here as our model language, um, but businesses and institutions that commonly provide complementary single-use plastic products are banned or restricted from offering them. So this is usually things like single-use plastic bags, polystyrene foam takeout containers, and straws. But it can include other single-use plastic products that maybe your community has identified as a problem, such as like mini hotel toiletries or water bottles. And one thing to note is that this um, law is really adaptable, and it can be passed on the local level as well. So towns have passed things like bag bans, as well as the state level. And all of these things can also be implemented federally, but of course, that is a whole other can of worms. And so, if you really want to focus on your community, local or state level legislation might work best for you. And so another thing to note is that these single-use plastic laws really have a lot of flexibility. So you can make sure that there's things like folks that really need certain items, such as straws for like disability accessibility issues, can still be accessed. And then second to last is is if you want to regulate high heat facilities in your community. And I say high heat because, as I mentioned before, the industry likes to come up with a lot of different terms for various technologies that subject waste to high heat. And so we just kind of wanted to make sure that this is getting across that all those technologies are toxic and so should be regulated. And so that's why we kind of keep it general here. But because it's difficult to find the right law for your community, we offer various options for you to consider. And so this could include outright banning these toxic and climate damaging facilities that burn trash. It could be restricting where they can be built, or limiting their ability to exploit legal loopholes or benefits from the government, like subsidies or tax breaks or things like that. And so this is a way of kind of confronting head on some of those toxic waste management practices that we have, and kind of combating the way that these high heat facilities are really trying to tout themselves as like kind of like a green option when really they're just as bad as what we have. And then finally, we have if you want to regulate sewage sludge. So sewage sludge is basically the noxious chemical filled byproduct from wastewater treatment facilities. So all of our sewage or like kind of waste from our sewer go from households to businesses, institutions, industrial, medical sites, go to the wastewater treatment facility, and they treat all that waste, and get the water that is treated and kind of send that back out into the environment. But what's left is this kind of chemically filled um, solid material, kind of mud-like material called sewage sludge. And unfortunately, approximately 7 million dry tons of sewage sludge is produced in the United States, and about half of this sludge is spread on farmland as fertilizer. And this is because it's been marketed as a safe fertilizer and even supported by governments. Um, but this sludge always contains toxic contaminants such as PFAS. I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with PFAS, as well as microplastics, which, of course, we're learning more and more that the plastic that is produced and then waste and then like in placed in landfills and incinerated and things like that, as well as the kind of these materials that's ending up in sewage sludge, are toxic to our bodies. They're being found in our brain, in breast milk, in placenta. So it's really getting through into our bodies and causing some really um, health harms. And so it's really been a public issue that a lot of people are becoming more familiar with and hoping to combat. And so this sewage sludge is unfortunately spread on farmland, which then contaminates our soils, our waterways, our food. And a lot of farmers have been battling health issues because of this. And so this is really an unacceptable risk to human health. And so the model law that we offer here is to our sewage sludge pollution prevention laws. And so they're really there to either ban the practice of spreading sludge on farmland or restrict it, or to kind of have some higher testing and monitoring of PFAS contamination in sludge. Some others also like pause it for a time in order to study a little bit more, because some communities feel that more knowledge is needed. But our recommendation is always to just go ahead and ban it, because the science at this point is quite clear that it is um, contaminating and harmful. And so these policies empower communities to protect their food, water, and their farmers. So I will close with that, and I hope that folks will consider adopting some of these zero waste policies in their community. And please feel free to check out our tools on our website. And if you need any assistance, we also offer like technical assistance if you want to reach out to us. I included our email here, but you can also reach out to us in our various ways on our website and social media. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and I hope that was helpful.
That was incredibly helpful. We had no idea, and I'm sure most of the people on online with us now were thinking that we're recycling, and so we're making a difference. And so, thank you for bringing that clarity that this is a much bigger problem, and that we're going to have to approach it from a community's perspective and not only um, as individuals. We should certainly do our part and be mindful of consumption, but we have to tackle this collectively. And so that was really helpful. And all the various toolkits that's available to us. I love the fact that you know you have to adapt for what's going on in your community. I think for me, the first thing to do is to find out where any sewage sludge is being released near where I get any of my produce from, because that's just mind-boggling. Um, and so thank you for that. That's certainly one that I'm interested in. And just thank you for taking the time to explain this to us. And now we know we have this resource available to us. And one of the things that we've been really helping people to understand is that we don't have to be the one to figure it out, that there are people who are already working on solutions that we can join in, we can support, and we can incorporate for our own purposes. And so that was very important for us today. Thank you for saying yes. We really do appreciate you, and look forward to implementing some of the things that you have shared. I'm just going to double check the chat um, to see if there was any specific question. Um, oh, well, great. Definitely, people are saying thank you for sharing. And And again, thank you for being on. I'll certainly be reaching out to you separately. But this is serious stuff, folks. This is what we are ingesting into our bodies. We just came off of our food and faith session, and we want to know what's going in our bodies. And so where people are dumping is incredibly important to know. Uh, uh, Vanessa, maybe you guys want to put out a database where we can track things. That would be interesting to see. But we have some work to do, folks. We have some work to do, and we have the tools to do it. So thank you for that, we really do appreciate you. And anything further? All
Not for
right. So
me, but
we are
hopefully
grateful.
you all have our information, and please feel free to reach out if anyone would like assistance with any of those policies I mentioned.
Absolutely, absolutely. Will do. Will do. Thank you, thank you, thank you.